allow me to proudly introduce and welcome back to Oconomowoc, Professor Ed Fallone. Yeah.
I was asked by Dwayne to talk about the elections of last November. First of all, a quick recap, in case anyone has forgotten. In the November election, the partisan divide in our state, if it was possible, got even wider. 96% of voters voted for the party they were registered with. 5% of the voters crossed party lines, if you look at the governor and attorney general race. Scott Walker had won single-digit victories in 2010 and in the recall election of 2012, and he won another single-digit victory. And just as an aside, I always thought to run for president, you had to win a major double-digit victory to establish your ability to appeal across party lines. Apparently that is no longer the case. Apparently squeaking by in 3 elections makes you a national contender. To take on Governor Walker, the Democratic Party in our state handpicked a candidate who presumably could appeal to independents, the 2 or 3 that are left in our state, and could maybe peel off some Republican voters who were tired of Governor Walker. And Mary Burke fit the bill as a centrist, a person with a background in business, and a female candidate who could presumably appeal to women voters who are tired of conflict, the idea in the political world being that women don't like conflict. They will vote for female candidates, they will vote for change to avoid conflict. But I think it's also safe to say, in my opinion anyway, that both ran campaigns that lacked a strong message. Burke's message was, I won't make the same mistakes Walker made on the economy, which is helpful, but it's not very inspiring. What would she do? It was not very clear what she would do to me. It was not very clear what her agenda would be. There was no strong statement in support of labor rights. Right? We're told Act 10 is the third rail, don't raise that issue again, so she didn't. No strong statement in favor of public education. No strong statement in support of same-sex marriage. Just, I won't be as bad as Walker. No sharp contrasts. No strong positions that might offend a possible independent voter, a possible moderate Republican. Again, like the unicorn, maybe they exist, I haven't seen one. No strong positions likely to induce attack ads, right? No sharp corners. Don't give them anything to attack you on. But of course the attack ads came anyway. And they were ridiculous on their face. Burke is incompetent at business, right? Susan Happ cut sweetheart deals, plea deals with defendants who she had done business with. Absolutely ridiculous on their face. In fact, so ridiculous it seemed as if both campaigns, the Burke campaign and the Happ campaign, at first were unsure how to respond. It was like they had plotted out every possible attack that a reasonable, rational person would make. So when the crazy attack came, they didn't know what to say. On election day, as has been noted, turnout in our state was the highest on record for a midterm election, 54.6% of eligible voters, but still not enough for Democrats to prevail. Walker kept the gender gap with women to under 10%, still very high, but not disastrous, and he offset that gender gap with increased support among male voters. He pulled out a 5.7-point victory versus a 5.8-point win in his first election in 2010, basically replicating that. The recall margin in 2012, the recall election margin was 7 points, but that was inflated because so many voters just don't like the recall process. And that inflated his margin there. The key, of course, was that the energized voters in the election this last fall were Republicans. While the polls always showed a close race, consistently Walker had pulled ahead in likely voters. Those energized voters who say, yes, I'm definitely going to vote. And his guys did show up, and they did vote. Democrats needed a wave of young and female and minority voters who were eligible to vote. They were out there. I know they exist, but they didn't show up in the numbers Democrats Democrats needed to overcome the Republicans, the energized Republicans. And the congressional and Senate races showed the same pattern. Energized Republicans showed up. Young female minority voters didn't show up in the numbers needed. What we have here now, in my opinion, is a situation where Republicans and Democrats are playing two different games. Democrats continue to try to assemble a majority coalition. Democrats appeal to not only the party faithful, but they are trying to convince undecideds. They are trying to broaden the base, and mostly by making rational arguments, because I think it's safe to say we're rational people. We think that there are correct policies and correct solutions that will actually make a difference in people's lives and will actually resolve some of the problems we face as a society. This desire to assemble a broad coalition leads to a drifting towards compromise and consensus. Well, we can't solve the whole problem, or solving the whole problem would make too many people upset, so let's start with part of the problem. Or we don't have all the solutions, so let's adopt some of our solutions and some of the Republican solutions. And all that does is muddle the discussion, and consensus and compromise does not lead to energized voters. No one rushes to the polls saying, yay moderatism, yay consensus. So that's the Democratic game, is we're trying to convince people we have solutions, and we're trying to talk to them rationally about vote for Democratic candidates and you'll get these solutions and solve these problems, and we're trying to change minds, and we're trying to convince people. Republicans aren't really doing that. They're not really interested in changing minds or convincing people. They're talking to one audience, those who are already decided, those who have already made up their minds. That's who they're talking to. And they want that audience to be energized. And then they want that audience to turn out in extremely high numbers at the polls. We're talking, 80, 90% of registered Republican voters in a county showing up, right? And they continue that energy level by manufacturing and selling outrage. Outrage on everything, even if you have to make up a topic to get outraged about, right? Does anyone remember Bill Clinton getting a haircut on Air Force One, and that became an outrage, and Obama saluting with a coffee cup, getting on the helicopter, that became an outrage. It doesn't matter. They don't care what the outrage is. They're in the business of manufacturing outrage and selling it to their consumers, the party faithful, to keep their energy level up. Energy level means voting. Energy level means financial contributions. If you use wedge issues to divide opposing candidates from each other and divide opposing candidates from some of their supporters, if you shrink elected offices that serve as training grounds and bastions of Democratic office holders, shrink city government offices, fewer places for Democrats to get elected, get experience, get name recognition, shrink county governments, fewer places for Democrats to get that experience and name recognition. It's easier to buy elections if there are fewer of them, too. Of course, attack the funding of your opponents, unions. Attack the funding, kneecap them. Reduce the number of Democratic voters in general, voter ID. And attack any independent institution with power that you can't control. Government Accountability Board, you name it. Any independent institution that has power that you can't control, attack it. If you do all of that, it turns out a hardcore minority can win elections. How many times have speakers today said divide and conquer? How many times? Here's what I think is going on with the Democratic Party and the Democratic voters. We think that elections are a process for democratic self-governance. What a horrible thing to believe. We believe that the people of the United States govern this country, and we use elections to do that. It is where the will of the people is expressed through an election, choosing representatives who have taken certain positions that we agree with, hoping to move our country in that direction. Through the process of history, right? History is understood as the steady expansion of democratic participation. We look at history and we say, oh yes, well, it started with a very small group voting and controlling what happened, but then it expanded to include, there were no longer property qualifications. So no matter how poor you were, you could vote. And then it expanded, of course, we ended slavery. We had the 14th Amendment, the 13th and 15th Amendment. Slavery's abolished. Now African-American males can vote, but not African-American females yet. We needed then to have the suffragette movement and an amendment to the Constitution, and then women could vote. And slowly, we think of our history as this progression, and it's going to keep going, right? It's going to keep going. But think about this. There are several assumptions in this model. Okay. One is the assumption that this history of expansion will keep on going, right? This is evolution. This is just the way it is. The law of nature. More and more people participate in democracy. Well, guess what? History doesn't run in a straight line. People in the Republican Party have always been very clear about. They say, and high-level Republican strategists is saying, look, we create reality. We don't wait for reality to happen. You guys think about reality, you study reality. No, we create reality. And so I think the Republicans are playing a different game. They're playing a different game. The Democrats want to use elections to participate in democratic self-governance. The Republicans just want to win elections. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it's the progressives who have come to believe that there's a positive moral value in broad-based participation in government. Okay? The progressives who have placed a positive moral value on that. Republicans just don't place a positive moral value on broad-based participation in government. They're indifferent to it, Republicans. And it's not convincing any Democrats to change their mind, but the Republicans aren't trying to do that. It's the Democrats who are trying to convince Republicans to change their mind, and I'm not so sure that that's working. I would simply make some quick suggestions here. First off, start playing the same game. Recognize that elections are not about making rational arguments. They're about getting voters to the polls to vote for your candidate. Democrats need to constantly reinforce philosophical beliefs. Need to create a positive feedback loop which is constantly reinforcing the core beliefs of the party. That is more important. Loyalty and energy follow from that. That is more important than rational argument for particular issues, in my opinion. Parties should identify and promote candidates who believe in these core issues, even if they don't have name recognition, even if you think they can't win the race, even if you think maybe another candidate who's maybe a little more centrist. We all have little narrow silos. We need to break across the silos. I think Elizabeth Warren is right on. What does the Democratic Party stand for? There has to be something that unites all the silos. Now, the Tea Party keeps saying they want freedom from government. Well, the progressive movement is about freedom, but freedom from economic oppression and economic exploitation. Progressive movement, the best explanation I heard of the birth of the progressive movement came from Teddy Roosevelt when he explained why he embraced the Progressive Party. He said, well, and he was the son of privilege, very, very wealthy family in New York. He said, when I looked and I realized that there were these new creations out there, corporations, that had the power to dictate people's lives, what jobs they had, how much they got paid, how long they worked. And I realized that the only institution powerful enough to protect people from these corporations was the government. Then I knew the government's job was to get between these corporations and the people and protect them from exploitation, from oppression. That's from Teddy Roosevelt. And I look every day, I read the newspaper, and I wish Teddy Roosevelt was here today, because we are back in that moment. It's not about poor versus rich. It's about the government serving the people instead of serving the corporations. and putting itself in between. And I think that that can be a unifying message for those who are looking for messages. So I thank you very much again for being here, and I look very much forward to seeing all of you again in the future. Thank you.